So, here's my 3 big ideas for today. You can go away with these. In order to be a spiritual mentor, a spiritual parent, you need to, first of all, become a coach, not a critic. Okay? First point. Be a coach, don't be a critic. I pastored Surrey Pentecostal Assembly for almost 10 years, built a church down in the heart of Surrey, and God did some great things. One of the highlights of that time of pastoring was we had a men's, I don't know what it was, some sort of meeting, and we invited Wally Buono there. He goes to Peace Portal Alliance in White Rock. He's a Christian, grew up on the streets of Montreal. You didn't want to know him in his teen years. He was violent and drug addicted and all kinds of mess in his life. But a coach on a football team saw some potential in him, pulled him off the streets and said, Wally, I'm going to invest in you. And so he started investing in Wally and became his spiritual dad and actually ended up leading him to Christ. And so he was the head coach at that time of the BC Lions, and then he went on to be general manager. But he spoke to our men, and he said this. He said, you know, when my team stunk it up on the field and lost the game because of all these errors, he said the last thing they needed when they got to the dressing room was their coach to tell them how bad they did. The last thing they needed was someone to tell them what they already knew about themselves on the field. And he said, friends, this generation needs coaches, not critics. They need people who will fan into flames the gift that God has given them, not to throw fuel on fires that are burning within them. That's what a critic does. And that's what Paul says to Timothy. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flames the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. Isn't that an interesting phrase? He's not there saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. If you only cut your hair and didn't wear that clothing, if you didn't talk like that or behave like that, you'd be more like Jesus. They didn't need that. What they need to do is that a coach finds one good thing, 2 good things about what a person is doing or saying or how they behave, and they fan that into flames. They say, you're doing a good job. And they earn this level of trust so that they can go into the deeper levels, the deeper waters with that person, and then start working on the areas that they need help and improvement in. They don't start with things that they do bad. They earn the trust, they earn the right to speak, and then they can coach that person to be more Christ-like. Edna was 100 years old, okay? 100 years old. So her church decided to throw her a big party. And they put this big birthday table up there. They had a big cake, and they were celebrating Edna. They called for the mayor to come, and they called for the local TV to cover this event. And Edna had the house packed with all of her friends, and her family was there. And one of the interviewers asked her, this was on local television, asked her, Edna, what is the best thing about being 100 years old? Okay? And Edna says, well, you like my accent? Well, I believe that the best thing of being 100 years old is realizing that my life will live on in those that I mentored. Wow, Edna, you nailed it. 100 years old. Then the interviewer asked, and what's the worst thing about being 100 years old? And I quote, so you can't hold this against me. Edna replied, well, I guess the worst thing is looking around this room at all these people and realizing that 4 of those old bags are my daughters. Isn't that good? Edna. Who can argue with a 100-year-old, right? They've seen a lot. Lucy Swindoll says, for good or ill, a mentor's mark is permanent. Mentors write on the hearts of their protégés what the rough hand of this world will never erase. Can you imagine that? Can you think back of your grade 4 teacher? I can, Mr. Lowe. Mr. Lowe was my grade 4 teacher. Here's a Pakistani kid, born in Karachi, Pakistan, moves to Powell River. I'm 10 years old. I'm 9 actually, just going on to 10, but my birthday is weird, so I was in grade 4. And I was getting picked on left, right, and center, and treated really poorly in school. And Mr. Lowe spots me out and says, Ken, you have amazing gifts. You're going to make something amazing out of your life. And he was a Christian. He said, God's got his hand on you. And all these years, I've never forgotten that Mr. Lowe believed in me. Miss Ferguson, grade 6, didn't. Okay? Just kidding. And you know what? I got her again in grade 7. But she was an amazing teacher. But Mr. Lowe just built into me and loved me, and I'll never forget how he spoke into my life. Building loving relationships requires intentionality. Intergenerational mentorship requires a love-based relationship, a coaching relationship, not a relationship based on criticism. You have to care before you correct. You have to adore before you advise. Let me say that again. That's tweetable. You have to care before you correct. I'm not saying mentors don't correct. I'm just saying you have to care before you correct. And you have to adore before you advise. Guide them, direct them, but do it in love. Speak the truth in love. Be a coach, not a critic. The second thing, leave a legacy, don't give a lecture. Leave a legacy, don't give a lecture. You know where legacy comes from? Your soul. It's your being. It's who you are when no one else is watching. A pastor was speaking about integrity, honesty, and the next day, Monday morning, he's in the hardware store and he's having to purchase something. I can't remember, it was a tool or something, and he pulls out a $20 bill and hands it to the cashier, and she actually gives him change for 100. Okay? He pays with 20, gets change for 100. He grabs the money and he thinks, wow, bonus, right? And he's about to take the money and turn around and walk away, and God convicts him and says, you just spoke about integrity. Like, you got to go back and make this right. So as he's turned around, he then turns back to the cashier and he says, I'm sorry, you've given me too much change. This is not right. And the cashier says this, and I'm not exaggerating. She goes, oh, it wasn't a mistake. I was in your church on Sunday, and I wanted to make sure you were actually going to do what you said you were going to do. She's a non-Christian, and she purposely gave him too much change to see if Christians really do what they're supposed to do when no one else is watching. Right? He could have turned and walked her out of that store, but he didn't. Thank God he didn't, So friends, leaving a legacy is about you and your conduct and your words and the style of words that you use. And it's not about giving a lecture. It's not about preaching a sermon. Leaving a legacy is not about giving a lecture. Philosophy is written in journals, but faith must be infused into the heart and soul of every protege that you have in your circle. The best passage on mentorship is, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. Make fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. Disciples. Learners. Okay? How do you make them? Well, you mentor them. That's how you make disciples. You mentor them. You don't do it in a Sunday school classroom. You don't do it necessarily off a sermon platform. You do it through life-to-life infusion. That's what mentorship is about. Not giving a lecture, not giving a sermon. You're going to forget this sermon in about 6 months. But you won't forget how my wife made you feel, or the interest I took in your kids. Okay? You won't forget that. At conference, there's this young couple in ministry, Aaron and Rebecca, and they're going over to Thailand. They pastored in Prince Rupert, and I went up there and spent about 4 days with them, did some leadership training with their board, and then walked along the beaches of Prince Rupert with them, or the ocean front of Prince Rupert, and their 2 kids, Sam and Bella. Well, I don't have any grandkids of my own. You might want to make that a point of prayer. Don't know what's the matter with our daughters. They not read the manual? Like, shouldn't there be a manual that we can give them? Anyways, that's a whole other subject. But here, Sam and Bella are like steel to magnets with me. They just are loving me and calling me Uncle Ken, and I'm drinking this all up because I don't have kids of my own. And so at conference, they show up, and I'm in the lobby, and they come running across the lobby of Evangel Church in Kelowna, Uncle Ken! And I'm loving this, right? So then we're commissioning them to go to Thailand, and they're up on the stage, and one of our other superintendents are commissioning them, and so he kind of motions to me to come up to the stage and pray over them. So I come up, and I give Bella a little kiss on the cheek, and she goes like this. she kind of squirms, and then later Brenda told me, she said to her mom, Uncle Ken kissed me in front of all those people. You know, she was kind of embarrassed. But you know, this little girl, I'm like steel, a magnet to steel with her. I want her to grow up loving Jesus. I want her to see Jesus in my life. I want her to one day lead a movement, a church, or a group. I believe in women in ministry, but I believe that young girl has a call of God on her life. And I'm going to fan into flames all I can to see her grow and nurture and be a woman of God. So, leave a legacy, don't give a lecture. There's a great quote. I hate to bore you with quotes, but this is good. I'm already 1 minute and 29 seconds over, so I'm almost done. Okay? 4 scholars were arguing over the most accurate translation of the scriptures. One claimed that he thought the King James Version was the most accurate. The second was confident that the New American Standard was the most clear. The third scholar preferred the New International as it seemed closest to the original languages. Finally, the fourth scholar spoke, and I quote, I prefer my mother's translation. Although she did not write a word of English, she's translated each verse of the Bible by her life. It is the most accurate and living translation I have ever studied. Isn't that amazing? The Bible is written in you. And the way that word, the living word of God, goes from you to another person is through your life, not necessarily through your words. Words are important. Words are important and they're powerful. But your life is way more powerful. Okay? I'm going to close. I know I said that about 5 minutes ago. This is real. Okay? I actually set my timer on my Apple Watch, and it went off about 10 minutes ago. Okay? Just so you know. Okay? I'm going to close with this. Last point. Be real. Authentic, not synthetic. Because the next generation can spot synthetic. They can smell you out. If you're fake, they're going to find you. And they're going to run from you. If you can't be raw and real, then it's not going to work. You can't be a spiritual mentor unless you want to be real. So where do I find that? It's in Titus. I read it to you earlier. And you yourself must be an example to them by doing good deeds of every kind. Let everything you do reflect the integrity and seriousness of your teaching. Let your teaching be so correct that it can't be criticized by those who want to argue, and they will be ashamed because they won't have anything bad to say about us. I'm so firm on this that hypocrisy can't be part of Christianity. You know, Jesus, he didn't have a problem with prostitutes. He didn't have a problem with tax collectors. He didn't have a problem with sinners. You know who he had the most problem with? Hypocrites. Whitewashed tombs. Right? He said, you look all pretty on the outside, but inside you're rotting. The smell of death is in you. That's the sin and the death that's decaying inside of you. A mentor, a spiritual mentor, cannot be artificial. They cannot be hypocritical. They cannot be insincere. A mentor who's just playing a part is not going to be a mentor at all. They won't be a mentor. Can I tell you a joke as I close? I got to leave you laughing. You got to go out laughing, right? This guy is looking for a job. So he goes through the want ads, and there's a position at a zoo. Okay, a zoo. He says, I've always wanted to work in a zoo. So he goes to the zookeeper's office and he says, I'm here to apply for the job that's in the newspaper. Can you tell me a little bit more about the job? And he goes, well, you know, it's kind of a special job. We have this grand opening in our zoo, and we had this African gorilla coming overseas in a cage, and the gorilla died. We've got all these crowds coming for the grand opening, and what we need you to do is dress up in a gorilla suit. And we want you just to lay in the corner of the cage. You don't even have to move. You don't have to blink. You can keep your eyes shut. All we want you to do is lay in the corner of the cage. Can you do that? He goes, how much does it pay? He says, we'll pay you 35 grand for the weekend. 35 grand for the weekend. Sign me up, he says. Get me the gorilla suit. So he gets into the gorilla suit, gets into the cage, lays down in the corner, and the grand opening happens. There are kids coming. There are families. Thousands of people are walking by, pressed up against the gorilla cage, right in the chain link fence. They're throwing peanuts and popcorn at the gorilla to try and wake him up. And this guy laying in the corner of the cage opens an eye and he goes, hey, they like me. I think I'm going to give them a bit of a show. He gets full of pride. I'm the main attraction. So he gets up off, from the corner of the cage, and he goes, like that, and the crowd just goes crazy. The kids are screaming. He thinks, I'm a hit, I'm famous. So he climbs up the tree in the corner of his cage, and he hangs with one arm, and he's swaying back and forth, and the crowd is just going crazy because he's doing all this. He starts swinging more and more rapidly, and then all of a sudden he catapults himself, because the branch breaks, into the lion's cage. Boom! He's laying on his back, stars kind of circulating, and he's sitting there on his lion's cage, and he feels the presence of the lion coming for him. And as he's laying on his back, he starts yelling, I'm a fake! I'm a fake! Get me out of here! And the lion pounces on him and says, shut up or you'll get us both fired.